Hey, what's up YouTube? Goratha here. Today I wanted to talk about my Fireball Frostwall Comet build. I made a video about this character a couple days ago, and it was mostly in the campaign, just getting started. I figured I'd update you guys with the build and how it's going in maps, and a lot of people have been asking me about it. I'm gonna go over all the gems, I'm gonna go over all my gear. I'll tell you guys the passive points and how I would go through the passive tree at this point. And I'll quickly tell you guys how I leveled the character. It wasn't anything too crazy though. Yeah, let's get started. First off, I want to show you guys the gems. This is probably the most important part, and this is the part that's probably changed the most. Now, I have gotten a bunch of 5 links, so I'll tell you guys what I think you should run before you get 5 links as well. Anyways, the key part of this character is that we're using Frostwall, Fireball, and Cast on Freeze. Now, this is important because this is kind of how the character works. We shoot out our Frostwalls, and we fireball the Frostwalls, and they all blow up. Now, when they explode, they deal cold damage. This cold damage has extra freeze build-up, so it freezes a lot better, and it'll proc Cast on Freeze. And with Cast on Freeze, we have Comet, and then the Comet does a bunch of damage. It has a really long cast time, so triggering it is a lot better than self-casting it. So if I self-cast it, it's a relatively long cast time, like 2.5 seconds, honestly. It's pretty ridiculous. The triggering it is a lot better. It's kind of balanced around self-casting, I believe, as well, because the damage is absurd. That's how the character works. Let's look over the gem links. Early on, I recommend you use Unleash and Scattershot. These are two most important gems if you only have a 3 link. And before you use Fireball, you could use Ember Fusillade. Ember Fusillade is pretty much just a pseudo, channeled projectile skill. They both use the same support gems, so you can just switch them over to Fireball once you get Fireball. And past that, I'm using Wild Shards and Rising Tempest. Now, early on, I recommend you actually use Life Tap here. And before you get Comet, you can also use Inspiration instead of Wild Shards. Wild Shards and Rising Tempest are something I added later on, and I'll show you guys some footage of why I'm using Wild Shards. It's pretty ridiculous. Actually, I'm going to show you right now, actually. Let me see. I'll probably get a proc soon. Now, it's basically a 20% chance to shoot a bunch of projectiles. Yeah, there was a 20% chance. Unfortunately, it happened when the Frostwalls were already dead, so it wasn't that impressive. It's a lot more impressive when it actually hits something in point blank. There we go. Yeah, so this is the key part of the build. And also, one upside to Blood Mage is that we spawn these orbs off of killing Frostwalls. And the next thing, Frostwall. This is the other part of the build. So I'm having this link to Icicle, Spell Cascade, Concentrate Effect, and Surge Casting. Now, early on, I linked this to Fortress. I decided that Fortress isn't really worth it. I replaced Fortress with Concentrated Effect. So my 3 link would be Frostwall, Spell Cascade, Concentrated Effect. If you get a 4th link, you run Icicle. Now, there is something to consider here. If you aren't doing enough damage to one-shot the Frostwalls, you probably should use Icicle instead of Conch. It really depends on how much damage you have. If you have enough Fireball damage and one-shotting the walls, then it's fine. But if you don't have enough damage, and you're not one-shotting the ice walls, then you should definitely use it. Because the clear speed and damage will be quite a bit worse. Right now I have a lot of damage, so I actually can do it without Icicle. But in general, Icicle is really, really good for consistency. And yeah, you might want to run this early on. Next thing in this build is the Cast on Freeze setup. So this is Comet linked with Falco and Impetus. Now, we do have to link this with Inspiration. Impetus basically allows us to trigger the Comet with 1 cast, as long as the Cast on Freeze is level 12 or above. If it's less than level 12, you'll need a little bit of energy gain on the tree. These nodes do nothing for me right now because I trigger on 1 cast. Refund also does nothing because every time I trigger a freeze, I'll proc Comet right now. And yeah, these are the gem links. Inspiration is really, really good. If you don't have Inspiration, it's a struggle for sure. You'll lose a ton of HP and mana, and you need this basically. This is probably the 4th link over. I'm not sure which one. Impetus probably. It would feel a little worse, but you need Inspiration. It's important. Moving on. I have a couple setups here that aren't too impressive, and I'm not sure if I'll be using them forever, but I'll go over them anyways. And that is, one of them is Eye of Winter. Eye of Winter is something I use on single target sometimes if I'm not feeling lazy. This supplies Cold Exposure with this socket, and Arcane Temper for more cast speed, and Ricochet. Now, this is just a utility spell for me. It gives me more crit. It gives me cold exposure. Not too much to say there. Frostwall is something else I use occasionally. I have this link to Strip Away, which makes exposure better. And another little crit. This makes it crit sometimes. And increase skill effect duration. Just to supply exposure further away, and it does some decent damage on its own. I'll throw it out occasionally. And then we have Blasphemy. Blasphemy is something I'm using with my spirit because I have extra spirit on my neck. This is pretty good. I'm using it with Hypothermia, Ritualistic Curse, and Magnified Effect. This just makes the AoE a lot larger, and I'm not sure if I'll be using Blasphemy forever, but this is pretty solid for damage. Yeah, past that, I'm not really using these skills down here. And our classic skill. So I am using a Life Limits, of course, with Cannibalism and Clarity. Ideally, you'd have Vitality here as well, but I don't have enough Spirit. So I'm using Cannibalism over Vitality. Life on Kill is really, really strong, especially once you have a little more life. Even early on, though, once you have like 1,000 life, it's pretty insane. So make sure you look into getting Cannibalism. This is should be a tier 3 though, so you might not get it right away. Anyways, these are the gym setups. I believe this is the best setup I've had so far. It might change a little bit later when I get more spirit or change my gear around, but this is currently what I'm doing, and it's working quite well actually. Now let me explain the gear. So I'll go with the Pasture Tree last. I think it's the least important in terms of gameplay. The gear is pretty important now. So before I had these gloves, I was forced to use Frostwall to trigger the Comet. Now with these gloves, they're called Blue Flame Bracers. These convert my fire damage to cold damage. I now am able to cast Fireball and freeze with the Fireball, and then this will trigger the cast on freeze itself. Now, Frostwall is still really insane. It's a lot of single target damage and a lot of explosions, and it makes the Fireball way more consistent. And generally, playing as a Blood Mage in melee range is a lot better for life sustain. So I still like the Frostwall quite a lot, and still an integral part of the build. This just allows you to off-screen things, and it's really nice for instances where you can't put Frostwalls up, which does happen occasionally when you're in like a really narrow space, like on a bridge or something. And it can be a little annoying, so that's something to keep in mind. These are pretty nice. They have some res on them as well. Not sure if I'll use them forever, but right now I definitely like them a lot. Now you may have noticed I'm using a shield. The staff was not really working out for me. The Witch/Sorceress does not really get enough defenses on the tree. I feel like I need a shield. The shield is 40 block, this is spell block, and block, and you get a bunch of life and res. I was nowhere near capped res without the shield, and I'm still not capped res with the shield, but it's a lot better. Definitely recommend using a shield. I haven't really been weapon swapping either, because I still think the overflow bug is happening. I'm not sure what's causing it exactly, but when you weapon swap, you lose your overflow sometimes. So I just haven't been bothering with weapon swapping at all. Maybe they'll fix that soon, who knows. And sometimes it does work, I don't really know. I'll mess around with it more and test and see what I can figure out with that. But anyways, the shield's good, basically. With that in mind, the wand. So I currently have a 1 SKS damage on it, but the rest of the stats are pretty insane. I would say for wand, you're looking for first plus levels of all skills. This will apply the fireball and all your cold skills. The plus skills is probably more important than plus cold skills or fire. And then I think spell damage is probably the next highest DPS. We don't really have that much percent damage, so this is really good. Crit is obviously insane for a crit build, and gain its extra is always really good. I think if we wanted to replace the chaos damage, we replace it with cold as extra damage too. That would probably be the only thing. The mana kill is actually quite nice for mapping. This is helping quite a bit, and not sure if you want to like go over your way for it, but it's definitely not bad. Cloak of Flames. I'm still using Cloak of Flames, and it's talking about some res Sorcors. This is not something I'm sure I'm going to be using super endgame. I'm planning on going Crimson Power, like super endgame with like a really high ES chest. That'll scale really well with Gore Spike. We'll have a bunch of crit multi that way. And then we'll also be using EB, which I am already. This will give us more mana. Mana has been a bit of a problem. That's why I decided to go EB. And I'll talk about the tree a bit later, but lots of mana regen nodes too, for that same reason. The belt. So the belt, I actually prioritize getting the plus charm slot really highly. Right now I'm using a rarity charm. I mean, you can get another plus charm here as well, and 3 charms is better than 2, so. Only thing to consider here. Res, strength, I mean life mana, all that's really good, but the charms is what I'm looking for mostly. The implicit should probably be the gain charges every 0.2 seconds or whatever. That would be the most useful in my opinion, but I have what I have. The boots. Most important stat here, move speed by far. Like 35 move speed is better than any stat on here. Like I should replace these boots as soon as possible even. You're very limited on movement in this game, and this is the only slot you really get movement, so that's the most important stat. It's more important than life, more important than res, everything else. Now, life, res, rarity, these are all good stats, attributes, but the receipt is the most important stat here. Rings. So, initially, I wasn't really going for cast speed, but I had 2 rings of cast speed at some point, and now that I have cast speed on rings, I really recommend you get cast speed on rings. The quality of life is insane. I wouldn't say it's like the most important stat. For casting on rings, it's really, really good. And then past that, you want looking for res and life. Not too much to say here. Mana regen would also be pretty good, and rarity, of course, is really good as well. So I have a breach ring. I was initially like really excited about this breach ring, and it's still really good. But the fact that it doesn't have cast speed or mana regen makes me a little sad. So I might look into replacing it with something like that. But the rarity is really good. I've been stacking rarity. I have about probably 80 when you combine everything together. And the next piece of rarity here, here, this is probably my best piece. Spirit, which is allowing me to run Blasphemy and Cannibalism. If I didn't have this, I just wouldn't run Blasphemy, basically. I might use this Spirit for something else later. We'll see. Still thinking of maybe trying to put in Cast and Crit or something like that. Yeah, Life, Res. The amulet's pretty stacked, honestly. You're looking for like plus level, Spirit, Life mostly. Probably in that order, actually. Spirit's probably the most important. Yeah, looking for something like this, probably. Helmet. Helmet. This one isn't really too impressive. It's just really high life, and I have 2 sockets on it with some attributes. The only reason I'm still using it is because it's giving me dexterity, which is allowing me to use the shield easily. So, yeah, looking for life, res, stats. Not too much to say here. Yeah, it's pretty much all my gear. I would recommend you actually go for like additional charges gained per second flask. Right now I'm missing one myself on this life flask. It helps a lot. A lot of time you're running around, you're backtracking, you're regaining flash charges, you're fighting bosses if you need to cut around. Just helps a lot. And that's pretty much everything with the gear. I haven't really looked at unique items too much, so I might end up using some more unique items if I find some interesting combination. I'll definitely update you guys. That's the current situation. Let's get into the tree. So, early on, I was leveling as Spark and Flamewall with Raiding Spirits. That was until 31. And I swapped to Fireball Frostwall at 31, and you can use Cast on Trees, I believe, at 36 whenever you get 60 Spirit. I believe you'd have to do Act 1, so you do the Act 1 normal for 30 Spirit, and Act 3 Cruel, and you'll have enough Spirit for Cast on Freeze. Or Act 3 normal, yeah. So, once you have that, you can use Cast on Freeze for Frostbomb before you get Comet, because Comet is higher level. I recommend Frostbomb, just throw it in there. You can put it with less duration instead of more duration while you have in the Cast on Trees, because they'll be used for more damage at that point. Anyways, with the tree, let's get started. So early on, I sucked all these spell damage nodes into Raw Destruction. I did spec out of these attribute nodes, but early on I had these attribute nodes right here. This is because we needed stats to run our gems and stats to run here. So dexterity, strength, int, whatever you need. Very important early on. Now, past that, I spec'd into Breath of Ice and Breath of Fire. You can weapon swap these. These are probably the first points you can weapon swap. It's a little annoying though because they have attributes on them, so keep in mind that if you weapon swap attributes, it'll take your gear off if you don't have the stats requirements without it. These nodes are really good. I took both of these, and I took Explorer the Elements at some point. I restocked all this at this point, but I think I would still take these early on again. Past that, spell damage is really, really good early on, especially because you're running multiple elemental skills, and spell damage scales them all at the same time. These are very strong. I tried out damage recoup, but to be honest with you, I don't really think damage recoup is really doing that much. In fact, I would say just don't take this first Ascendancy node after playing around with it. I would wait until you have your second Ascendancy, probably, even to just take the first and second at the same time. You can grab the additional life node, though, if you want to do it early on. Yeah, it's just too much effort for not enough gain early on. It makes bosses a lot harder. I was hoping initially that it was worth taking right away, but you can make it work. I made it work. I just think it'd be easier if you didn't. Kind of how I feel about that. I think they probably should make the life costs. They should make it less life costs, honestly, or something. This is a bit weird. I think it's really, really strong the way I have it now, but it's still really annoying to build around. And I think mana cost in general is in a weird spot. Half my trees spent on mana, and I'm playing a Blood Mage, and I'm still having mana issues. It's a bit weird. Anyways. Now I'm sucking into mana regen. I didn't really do this early on. This is like more after I got the cast and free set up. So I got cast speed, and then I got crit at some point. This is after I respec these nodes though. So early on, don't bother with either one of these. And then, of course, the spell damage. These crit nodes are actually pretty important, I think, if you do take Singomancy. Because you need the crit on bosses to actually get them to spawn. Something to keep in mind. Past that, initially I went over to the right side and grabbed elemental damage if you've ignited and shocked and chilled recently. These nodes are really, really strong early on, I think. Something to keep in mind. I did unspec these as well recently to go over here and grab these nodes. But yeah. Past that, climate change is really strong if you're playing cold skills. If you're not playing cold skills yet, I recommend just not taking this. But Frostwall is really good with this as well, so this may be around the time you actually start using Frost skills, so possibly worth taking that. And then at this point, once you start using Frostwall, you do want to grab the Shattered Crystal as soon as you start using Frostwall. This will make it so you kill the Frostwalls in one attack, and they all explode and overlap. Very important node and worth taking. And then once you switch to like any cold skills like Frostwall, Frostbomb, the top side becomes really good. You're looking specifically at +1 cold. Freeze buildup is really nice for triggering the cast on freeze. This will make it so monsters are pretty much never moving as well. Freeze is really OP defensively. And yes, some cold res, or some cold pen and exposure. Now cold pen is a bit weird. It doesn't go past 0, so I didn't really go too heavily into it. I'm mostly doing exposure and curse, and yeah. If you don't want to deal with that, you can take heavy frost at some point. This will allow you to ignore res completely, and just don't use exposure or cursing. It might actually be the best way to go about it, because then you don't have to worry about pen or anything, and you just use this instead. Something to consider. It's something I'm still thinking of. Now for EB, I actually do recommend you get EB as soon as you have any like amount of ES, because I didn't really feel like ES was doing anything without like good recharge investment. So EB just makes your ES actually useful. Mana is a problem, like I said. I would recommend taking these nodes to the left last. I think Arcane Surge is really nice, but early on you can get away without having it, and yeah. At some point I did take the AoE. I think you take it pretty early, actually, because it does help a lot with things like Frostbomb and things like Fireball explosions and Frostwall explosions. Not sure exactly when you need to take it, but this is some point. Probably before you take any of these nodes on the right side or left side. And Energize and Invocated Efficiency. Now, Energize is something you can take if you don't have a level 12 Cast and Freeze. You can probably take a couple of these. I'm not sure if you need to take all of them. You definitely don't need to take all of them, probably, but this will help you trigger the freeze on the first Cast and Freeze instead of having to attack multiple times. Invocated Efficiency, this will make your comments a lot stronger, and you get some mana back. Not really priority over crit, but it's pretty good. These nodes over here are all really good, so something to consider. Yeah, it's a bunch of crit stuff. I did take crit damage last, and I still don't even have crit damage over here yet. It's actually what I'm taking right now. Solving mana and getting all these other crit nodes and stuff was pretty important, so I didn't really get around to taking them yet. Yeah, it's a tree. It doesn't really change too much from early on, but I did have like the left side and the right side. This is just because traveling is a little annoying, and I recommend you make use of your gold to respec so they're stronger at certain points. There's really no point in having a bunch of travel nodes without any gain, so anytime you're traveling far away, just take extra points like crit damage, and then unselect them later. That's what I recommend anyways with that. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you comment below. I'll also be streaming this on Twitch 24/7. I'm going to play a lot. I'm hoping GGG doesn't nerf this. It is maybe in danger a little bit. I'm not sure. A comment maybe is doing a little too much damage. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what their criteria for nerfing is. This build is very satisfying though. Like, the explosions are insane. It looks amazing. It feels amazing to play. I've become a lot tankier now that I'm using a shield. Overall, I'm extremely happy with how the build has turned out, and I'm really happy to keep playing. One last thing I wanted to mention is people keep asking me if you need to go Blood Mage for this. I don't think Blood Mage is required. Invoker may actually end up being better. Storm River will work perfectly fine. I've been asked that question a lot, so I figured I'd throw it in there. I do think Blood Mage has some upsides, though. Like, Tangomancy is really, really good for Breach. It's really, really good for Ritual. Yeah, you pop off, you heal a lot, Overflow is insane. This actually pops off endgame with a lot of density. Leech apparently isn't really working that well right now, but it does something, I think. People are saying it's bugged. I think it actually does something. It's just not as good as people were thinking it's going to be. And Grasping Runes is probably one of the best nodes on any ascendancy. This is actually very strong defensively, and it's probably why I don't die that much. And yeah, overall, I think Blood Mage is still a very solid choice to this build. I'm not quite sure if it's better than Storm River or Invoker, but that's kind of how I feel about it right now. Definitely consider the other two options if you want. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that one. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.